If you're a beginner barista just trying to brew a decent cup of coffee in the morning, you absolutely know the frustration. You put in the effort, and it's just not right. Well, welcome to this explainer. We're going to empower you to fix that disappointing morning coffee once and for all by rolling up our sleeves and looking at the actual chemistry and mechanics behind your brew.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Why exactly does your espresso sometimes taste like a burnt tire and other times like a genuinely sour lemon? You know the exact taste I'm talking about. Look, it's not just bad luck, it's actually science. And today, we are going to diagnose exactly what's happening inside your portafilter so we can cure your gross coffee for good.
Here is exactly how we're going to do it. First, the magic of extraction. 2, Arabica versus Robusta beans. 3, spotting low-quality beans. 4, fixing those sour shots. 5, fixing the bitter shots. And finally, we'll wrap up with your ultimate troubleshooting checklist.
Starting with number 1, the magic of extraction. Let's demystify the hidden chemistry happening right in your cup.
So, the absolute foundational piece here is understanding extraction. In simple, jargon-free terms, extraction is just the process where hot water bonds with coffee grounds to pull out and dissolve specific flavors and oils into your cup. You don't need a PhD in chemistry to get this. Just imagine water acting as a tiny little vehicle. As it passes through or sits in your coffee grounds, it grabs onto molecules. But, and this is a massive but, it doesn't grab everything all at once.
You really have to think of your brew as this invisible timeline where flavor shows up in a very strict chronological order. Right in the first few seconds, the water dissolves the bright, slightly acidic notes. Then, moving into the middle seconds, it finally pulls out the sweetness and all those beautiful complex sugars. But watch out, because if you let it keep going into the final seconds, the water starts extracting heavy, deep, and lingering quinine bitterness. This timeline is literally the master key to unlocking everything else we're going to talk about today.
Moving on to section 2. Arabica versus Robusta beans, choosing the right foundation for your brew. So there are 2 broad families of coffee you're likely buying. On one side, we've got Arabica. We're talking specifically about a light or medium roast here. Arabica is a more modern, highly nuanced species. Because it's grown slower at higher altitudes, it actually has the time to develop incredibly complex sugars. In fact, it's got about 60% more sugars than its counterpart. And that counterpart, that's Robusta. Historically, this was the dominant bean, and it is exactly what it sounds like, totally robust. It packs double the caffeine and double the harsh chlorogenic acids. To hide this naturally lower quality, roasters often blast it into a dark roast that practically destroys any natural flavors and just leaves you with a burnt, roasty taste. If you're starting with a dark roast Robusta, well, a bitter cup is almost guaranteed right out of the gate.
All right, section 3, spotting low-quality coffee beans. Visual red flags hiding right there in your hopper.
Let's play detective for a second. If you pour your beans out on the counter, take a really close look at them. Are there cracked or busted shells? Do you see things called Quakers, those noticeable pale spots on the beans? What about visible insect damage? Or maybe the beans are just wildly unequal in shape and size. Also, give them a sniff. High-quality specialty coffee smells vibrant and alive. Cheap supermarket blends? They might literally smell a bit like a stale duck pond. Yeah, no thanks. If your beans show these physical symptoms, you've found your primary suspect. Seriously, just buying better, fresh coffee from a local roaster wins like 90% of the battle.
Section 4, fixing sour espresso shots, curing the puckering under extraction problem.
Okay, so what if your coffee tastes sour? Basically, sourness means your water rushed through the coffee grounds way too quickly, or your beans are trapped in carbon dioxide. Think back to that extraction timeline we talked about earlier. Sourness happens when your extraction is cut short. The water only had enough time to grab those initial, sharp acidic notes, and it completely skipped over the rich, balancing sugars that take a little longer to pull out. Let's look at the main culprits for this sourness. First up, your beans might actually be too fresh. I know it sounds weird, but freshly roasted coffee contains a ton of trapped carbon dioxide. If you don't let the beans rest and degas for about 1 to 2 weeks, the hot water hits the coffee and the escaping gas acts like a shield, blocking the water from extracting the oils. Visually, you'll see a shot overflowing with these big white and yellow bubbles. Second culprit, your grind might just be too coarse. If the coffee particles are too big, the water just gushes straight through the puck like a wide-open faucet, running completely thin and watery. This naturally leads to a shot time that is way too short. Anything under 20 seconds is going to be wildly under-extracted, and, you guessed it, incredibly sour. The fix here is super simple. Grind finer. That'll slow the water down. Section 5.
Fixing bitter espresso shots. Banishing those sharp, stabbing flavors.
Now, we gotta be really clear about what true bitterness actually is. We're talking about quinine acid. This is a sharp, stinging, stabbing sensation that you usually feel right on the back of your tongue. It's that same intense bitterness you get from a piece of 90% dark chocolate or tonic water. It is definitely not the pleasant, complex profile of a good brew. This specific super aggressive acid is only extracted when the coffee is steeped for way too long. The water has already dissolved all the good sugars and has just moved right along to pulling out the harsh, nasty stuff. You know, your coffee puck actually tells a story. When you knock out your used puck, take a look at it. If it's sloppy and wet, your diagnosis is pretty straightforward. You ground the beans way too fine. The water couldn't easily get through, so it just sat on top, heavily over-extracting and causing all that bitter taste. On the flip side, if your puck is incredibly dry and crumbly, you likely dosed way too much coffee into the basket and packed it down too tight. The water struggled unevenly through this massive wall of coffee, which leads to those burnt, bitter flavors.
And hey, don't forget the hidden culprits. Even if you have the absolute perfect grind in a flawless dose, if your water temperature exceeds 205 degrees Fahrenheit, you are literally scorching the coffee beans. It's too hot. Also, remember that coffee is full of natural oils. Over time, those oils build up inside your portafilter and your grinder. If you aren't regularly washing and descaling your equipment, that old, rancid oil is going to taint every single fresh cup you make with a bitter off-taste. All right, Section 6, your troubleshooting checklist, the step-by-step cure for beginner baristas.
Okay, here it is, your foolproof formula to fix your espresso. Step 1, inspect those beans. Ditch the shiny, oily, dark roast Robusta with insect damage and treat yourself to a high-quality medium roast Arabica. Step 2, clean your equipment. Get rid of all those stale oils. Step 3, dial in your grinder. Remember, once you're tamping with consistent pressure, your grind size is your main control dial. You want to adjust it so the water flows evenly with a rich, honey-like texture, not gushing like a faucet but not agonizingly dripping either. Step 4, time and measure. Aim for exactly 30 milliliters of espresso in exactly 30 seconds. That hits the sweet spot perfectly in the middle of our extraction timeline.
I want to wrap up with a thought from one of our sources that I think just hits the nail on the head. Sometimes slowing down is the best way to find that balance. Making great espresso doesn't require complex, magical techniques. It really just requires a balanced flow, temperature, and time. So, armed with this new understanding of extraction chemistry, what adjustments are you going to make to your morning ritual tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and enjoy your brew.